Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're doing a good old-fashioned advice video. I haven't done one of those in a long time. It's been a bit crazy. But today I want to give you guys some advice about how to approach learning a new accent as an actor. Now, full disclosure, you may already know this if you've been around my channel before, but I am not an accent or dialect coach. I am an actor, same as you watching, I'm assuming, unless you're just watching this for fun, in which case, hi, how you doing? So this is not going to be a tutorial. I'm not going to be breaking down how to do specific accents. I'm not going to be breaking down like the one true way to learn an accent. This is about how you begin to approach learning an accent as an actor, what things to avoid doing, what things you definitely should be doing to get yourself to a place where hopefully you can start thinking about putting the accent on your CV, or at the very least feel like you can do the accent for an audition, for example, or for a role if you want to do some prep work beforehand, or you know there's not going to be an accent and dialect coach available to you. If you're down for that, keep on watching. Before we get started, show of the week is Singing in the Rain. Why is it Singing in the Rain? Basically, I was thinking before I started filming, what should the show of the week be? And then I remembered the whole bit in Singing in the Rain where they're all learning how to talk because the talkies are a thing now, and Lena Lamont is like having these dialect sessions, and it's like, oh no, it's terrible. So yeah, that's why Singing in the Rain is the show of the week. I'll put a link to the cast recording in the description. Also, it's been so long since I've seen the film of Singing in the Rain. Good Morning, best dance number of all time, arguably. It's great, love it. Moses Supposes, also a tune. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into accents. Boom. Tip number one for how to start learning an accent by yourself is do not Google how to do X accent. Don't do it. Just don't. Firstly, you don't know the credentials of the people. I mean, we all know Dick Van Dyke's terrible Cockney accent in Mary Poppins, right? He worked with a dialect coach. That dialect coach was Irish and had never heard a Cockney accent before. So just because someone says, I'm a professional and I'm on YouTube telling you this is how you do an X accent or Y accent, you don't know that. You don't know if they're actually gonna tell you anything that's actually useful, or if they're just gonna be talking out their ass. Secondly, even if they are legit, any advice, just by the nature of it being a general blog post or video or whatever on the internet, the advice is going to be generic. A random person on the internet is not going to be able to listen to you attempt an accent and know exactly what specific things you need to fix in order to get that accent to sound more authentic. They're gonna say general things like general vowel placements are more back or more forward. The R's are pronounced or they're not pronounced. If you've never heard an accent before in your life, maybe that would be a basic, like absolute beginner starting point. But for example, if you're an American, you've heard an English accent. You're listening to me talking, so you're hearing a Southern English accent right now. Someone explaining that we don't pronounce our R's and the vowels tend to be further back in the mouth than in a standard American accent is not going to be helpful to you, because you're going to be like, well, duh. As soon as you get beyond, you know, I've heard the accent a few times and I can recognize it if I hear it, that kind of generic advice is not going to be helpful to you. Thirdly, along with it being generic, whoever on the internet is teaching you how to do whatever accent is going to assume you're coming from a specific starting point. Learning a Southern English accent when your native accent is American is going to be completely different to learning a Southern English accent if you're Scottish or French or Nigerian or Glaswegian or from New Zealand. Like, you're coming from different starting points, so there are different things you'd need to modify and different things you'd need to pay attention to. And the fourth thing, some of the stuff is just wildly generic and inaccurate. The fact that I can Google how to do a British accent and searches come up, like there is no such thing as a British accent. Now obviously when people say a British accent, they actually mean an English accent or a standard English accent, but Britain, the island of Britain in the UK, is made up of 3 countries. You've got England, Wales and Scotland, all with completely different accents. Not to mention that the accents vary within the country. So England is the biggest country in Britain. My accent, which is a general Kent estuary Southern English accent / standard English accent is completely different to multicultural London English, received pronunciation, a Cornish accent, a Devonshire accent, a Bristolian accent, a Mancunian accent, a Liverpudlian accent, where's the one that's north? Newcastle. A Geordie accent. That's the one. They all sound completely different. That's not even to mention, like, obviously a Welsh accent is different. That I can't do a Welsh accent at all. All I can say is, whose shoes are those trainers? And even that is probably terrible. And it's going to sound completely different to Scottish. And within those countries, there are differences. I don't really know so much about Wales, but I'm pretty sure Northern Wales and Southern Wales are distinct accents. In Scotland, even just the cities of Glasgow and Edinburgh, different Scottish accents. And that's not even taking into account the Highlands, the borders, all of that. And then there's Northern Ireland, which is, you know, part of the UK, but not part of Britain. But then a Northern Irish accent is completely different to a Southern Irish accent. Also, tangent, Southern Ireland is a separate country called the Republic of Ireland. It's complicated, but all this to say, the British accent isn't a thing at all. So the fact that you can Google that and you get results, yes, I know they're just assuming that you mean English. You might not mean English. You might be like, I need a British accent, but I know they're from like this town. And then you're going to Google how to do a British accent because you don't know what region that is because you don't live in the UK. And then you're just going to get loads of people giving you how to do received pronunciation or a Southern English accent, and it's going to sound completely wrong. So yeah, just don't Google it. You're going to get inaccuracies. Man, I get heated. Whew. What's number two? Number two, what you're going to do instead of Google how to say X accent is you're going to find samples of native speakers talking. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to write this down. The International Dialects of English Archive is a brilliant resource. It's basically a free database where it has every single accent basically speaking standard English. They have all of the Caribbean islands, they have all of the states of America, they have all the regions of the UK, they've got Europe, they've got Africa, they've got Asia, literally anywhere where you can find an accent. They've found people who speak English but have that accent and have just recorded them. Not only that, but with all of the samples that they have the native speaker speaking a set text that they're reading, which has pretty much every single vowel and consonant sound you're likely to come across when speaking English. And secondly, they ask their samples to just talk naturally about something. So I know with one of the Trinidad and Tobago samples, the sample I was listening to, the woman is just talking about her first experience going to carnival, which was just lovely. I just loved hearing her talk about it. It was great. They're talking naturally. You can hear the natural flow and cadence of their accent when they're not thinking about what they're saying or wondering how you pronounce a word that they don't usually say and things like that. If for whatever reason you can't find a good sample on the International Dialects of English Archive, what you can do is search on Google and YouTube for interviews or vox pops with sports people from the country that the accent is from, local politicians from the country that the accent is from or the region that the accent is from, or there's my notes falling on the floor. Or videos, vox pops, promotional materials for high school, secondary school, sixth form, college, not university. Why those specific people? Let me get my notes. Firstly, the reason you want to go for high school promotional materials as opposed to university testimonials or promotional materials, video materials, is that universities have a broader intake from around the world. Not everyone, depending on your means, but in general, you'll get people traveling across the country or even to different countries in order to study at a university. Whereas with high school, sixth form, college, things like that, kind of education between the age of 16 and 18, that's kind of the point in young people's lives where they might want to move further afield to a specific college or sixth form college, but it's very rare that people would move so far afield that their accent would be radically different. But because it's not like primary school or elementary school or whatever, they're going to advertise. Once you get to 16, 17, 18, you may choose to go to the next town over to a college there. You'll probably be looking at your sixth form options before university, and so those colleges have a reason to have promotional material with students speaking their native accent, saying, yeah, this school is great. Similarly with local politicians, obviously people who get into politics, at least in Britain, tend to be from a higher economic class, so that could affect what kind of accents you're going to hear. But again, with local politicians, they're probably going to be local to the area. It's unlikely that they've moved in from across the world, which can distort their accent. And if they're tied to the local area, there's not so much of a need for them to try and augment their accent to try and widen their appeal or anything like that. The reason when it comes to kind of more celebrities, you want to go for sports people rather than, say, singers or actors, there's less pressure for them to change things about themselves that come naturally, like their accent, the way they dress, the way they do their hair when they're not on the sports field or on the track or whatever. They can just keep their natural accent. They don't have those same pressures. And also, they don't really have to up and move their entire lives out of their home country necessarily. Not the same with all sports, but if you're talking about kind of the traditional athletic sports like track and field, things like that, most people can train in their home country for those things. Their accent won't be distorted from living in another place. Whereas if you're an actor, maybe you've moved to the UK, maybe you've moved to Hollywood, maybe you've moved to New York. And so whatever your natural accent was is going to be distorted by spending so much time in those places. Not to mention the fact that actors may feel for their career it's just better for them to just have a different accent. I know many of my non-British friends who I trained with who were from different parts of Europe, some of them did work really hard to try and lose their natural accents because then they wouldn't be stereotyped in casting as the foreign one. And a similar thing with music, not so much maybe feeling like you need to change your accent, but definitely the moving around to where your genre of music is like the center of that world. For example, I know lots of Afro beats and Afro fusion, Afro pop artists who are from other parts of the world. A lot of them choose to move to Nigeria or Ghana or spend a lot of time in Nigeria and Ghana because the music scenes in those countries are booming, and that's where a lot of the artists of like the big artists on the scene are from. So it makes sense for them to move to Ghana. If you're a Brit moving to Ghana or Nigeria and you spend like a couple of years there, that's also going to have an effect on your natural accent. Last thing on the samples that you find, once you've gathered your samples either from IDEA or from the internet, wherever you've gone, listen to all of them, but for the next steps, try and find a sample that is a similar age and the same gender as you, ideally. You want to find someone who has a similar voice, a voice in like a similar range, so that when it comes to practicing, it's easier for you to imitate. Tip number 3. Listen before imitating. I'm going to say it again. Listen before imitating. Especially if it's an accent that you're kind of familiar with. Maybe you hear it a lot in media. For example, in the UK, we get a lot of American media, American TV shows, things like that. If you've never learned how to do an American accent, you might feel like, oh, I can just jump in because I know what this sounds like. Not necessarily. No matter how well you think you probably can fudge the accent, no matter how many times you've heard the accent before, if you dive straight in, you'll revert to stereotypes or assumptions you've already made about that accent that might be wrong. You might think certain sounds in the accent are really similar to your native accent, but actually are completely different. You might think, especially with accents that are so far removed from your native accent, that because it sounds so different, all of the sounds must be different in some way. But then actually when you listen to the accent, there are several vowel or consonant sounds that are actually exactly the same as in your native accent, and you don't need to change them at all. So listen to the accent, make notes. If you can get a transcript of what they're saying, like I said, on the International Dialects of English Archive, they have the transcript of the set text, and also they transcribe the samples chatting about their lives as well. So you have both of the text for those things. Print them out, make notes, write things down phonetically in a way that makes sense to you. And that's going to be different depending on what your native accent is, what makes sense to you. As long as you understand it, that's fine. Listen a good few times. It's really tempting to like dive in, but try not to. Wait, listen, make notes before you start trying to copy or imitate. Before I move on, I'm just going to talk about some of the key sounds that you can listen out for. This is by no means exhaustive, and again, it's going to depend on not only your own native accent, but you as a person, but just in general, some things that I always listen for when I'm approaching the accent. Number one is what's called the schwa, which is the sound that people make in general when they're hesitating. So, it's literally me trying to think of how I'm going to say the next bit, but like all of the bits that I cut out of my videos technically. In my accent, it's basically is the schwa in my accent. Different accents are going to be different. It gives you quite a good indication of where the whole accent sits in the mouth. Does it sit more forward? Does it sit more back? Is it high on the palate? Is it low on the palate? Those kinds of things. And there's quite a lot of words that in general the vowel sound will be the schwa. Like, to be honest, mother, yeah, the in mother in my accent is kind of the schwa. So you can use the schwa to be like, okay, what vowel sounds in English tend to be the schwa of whatever accent, and that can be a good jumping off point. The other big thing that for me I listen for is whether an accent is rhotic or not. R's are a thing that can really make or break an accent, and it's something that Brits doing American accents, especially, well, English accent, native British English accent speakers, I should say, get really wrong when doing American accents. Standard American and quite a lot of American accents are rhotic, so you pronounce your R's. If we go back to the mother example, you'd say mother. That wasn't very good, but you know what I mean. Like, you pronounce the R on the end of mother, or mother. How do you say mother in an American accent? Oh my god, I've completely forgotten. I guess because you usually say mom. I've heard mom more than mother in an American accent. Or like driver, dollar. What other words have R's in them? Yeah, you pronounce all your R's, basically, in a standard American accent. What Brits tend to do is they then add R's where there aren't any. So a lot of Brits with English accents will say idea. There's no R on the end of idea. So in an American accent, it should be idea, because you wouldn't pronounce the R because the R's not there. That's something that can really slip you up, is you think, oh, they pronounce all their R's, so then you start sticking in R's where there aren't any. On the reverse side, there are loads of Americans when they do English accents who pronounce R's where we wouldn't, like at the end of mother. And you guys get really confused. I'm so sorry, I know it's confusing. But this isn't a hard and fast rule. Obviously, a standard English accent or an accent like mine is non-rhotic. I can't think off the top of my head if there are any English accents that are rhotic, but there may well be, and you've got to listen out for that. I know with American accents, yes, in general, American accents tend to be rhotic. You tend to pronounce your R's, but there are some American accents that don't. For example, when I did Carousel for my final show at RAM, we had to do a New England accent, which is a non-rhotic accent. They don't pronounce all of their R's, and that's still an American accent. For me personally, I feel like the R's make or break an accent because it just sounds so jarring when it's wrong. I find it so jarring when Brits put R's where they're not meant to be in American accents, and it's so jarring when you hear American. I mean, there's lots of things about Americans doing English accents that it's like, oh no, mother. But yeah, pronouncing R's in random places is one of them. Also, you think all of our A sounds are like way back in the throat? Yeah, I can't think of a specific example. I'm gonna kick myself. If I think of an example in editing, I'll put it in. For example, we can say mom or ma'am. Americans will assume it's mom all the time. You always think our A sounds are like, oh, and they're not always. Sometimes they are more forward, it's okay. Also, when you guys do English accents, yeah, I'm assuming most of you are American. I'm sorry. If you're not from America, hi. Let me know what mistakes you make while doing English accents in the comments. This is a massive tangent, but I also find it hilarious when... Like, there's that episode of The Simpsons with the creepy kids, and they're meant to be British creepy kids, like English accent creepy kids, and they sound Australian. Like, I don't understand how... Because to me, Australian sounds completely different to English in terms of accent, but it always veers Australian, and I find it really funny. Like, because obviously Australian is quite close to Cockney, so I don't know if it's like you're trying to be posh, but then you go kind of Cockney, and then you just get transported over to Australia to hang out with some kangaroos and kill a whole bunch of natives. But yeah, it's really odd. For years I was like, South African and Australian are the same. They're not. There is a difference, but like, yeah, those are the ones I mix up. I'm like, what? Also, it's really hard to tell the difference between a Canadian accent and an American accent, actually. It's just certain vowels. It's certain vowels, and you're like, oh, that vowel is more towards the British way of pronouncing that vowel as opposed, well, the English way of pronouncing that vowel as opposed to the American way of pronouncing that vowel, so you're probably from Canada. But it's really hard. If you were just to talk to me in a random other side of the Atlantic accent, I'd be like, I don't know, do you have the Queen on your money? I don't know. That was a massive tangent. We need to move on. Tip number 4 is to shadow and mimic your sample. So you take the sample that you've chosen that is close to your age and your gender, so their voice sounds similar to yours, and you either shadow them or you mimic them. There's different ways you can do this. You can listen to your sample and try and speak along with them. You can listen to your sample for like a few words, pause it, and try and repeat it back, copying exactly the sounds. You can record yourself speaking the accent, speaking the text, either the transcription text or just the accent in general. Play it back and see if it sounds like your sample. Basically, you need to copy the musculature of your sample, right? Talking is a muscular thing, and your body is used to making certain sounds, moving the muscles in your tongue, lips, and teeth in certain ways to make certain sounds that fit your accent. Especially if the accent is radically different, it might feel really strange placing things in different places. The act of placing a vowel more forward or more back, placing a consonant in a slightly different place against your teeth. For example, comparing my accent to a received pronunciation or RP accent, words like little and kettle, for the t sounds in the middle of those words, I fully release my tongue. In RP, you only release the side, so it's little, kettle, bottle. Wow, I haven't done an RP accent in a really long time. The musculature is completely different, and when we were learning RP accents at college, I was like, this is really weird. But that's what you have to do. You have to get used to the musculature, and the only way you can do that on your own is by listening to the sample and trying to copy exactly what they're doing. How are they making that sound? Tip number 5 is to listen to the flow and the cadence of the accent. Now, tips 4 and 5, you can do either way depending on you as a person, as an actor, and what you find easiest. Do you find it easier to get the flow and the cadence of the accent first and then go into the nitty-gritty of how to produce each sound in the English language? What I do is get the nitty-gritty down, and then as that gets more into your muscle memory, you can then work on, okay, how does the accent actually sound holistically as a whole? Is it sing-songing and lilting, or is it quite flat and monotone? Is it quite harsh? Is it quite, not aggressive, but does it have quite a lot of bite to it, or is it kind of more chill, for want of a better word? Is it more chill and subdued? This is the big difference, well, one of the differences, but kind of the most distinct difference between a Northern Irish accent and a Southern Irish accent, for example, and also between a Glaswegian accent and an Edinburgh accent. Northern Irish / Glaswegian, obviously one of them's an Irish accent, one of them's a Scottish accent, but they tend to be kind of more harsh, more forward, more punchy, whereas a Southern Irish accent or an Edinburgh Scottish accent, they tend to be a bit more lilty. But also remember that this will still be relative. For example, you might be doing a Southern Irish accent, which in general is more sing-songing and lilting, But if you're playing a curmudgeonly old man who's very flat and just like to the point, his accent's not gonna be like a stereotypical leprechaun. I mean, none of your Southern Irish accents should be like stereotypical leprechauns. That's why you're listening to actual native samples of what people actually sound like. But you know what I mean. Once you've got the accent down, allow that to give you the flexibility of adapting it for the character. Because no two people from exactly the same place are going to sound exactly the same. There are going to be differences. There are going to be variations. If you're performing two different characters in your own accent, they're not necessarily going to sound the same. So when you're doing a different accent from your native one, the same rules apply. And finally, tip number 6. Once you've done all of that work, check in with either a native speaker or a qualified accent coach. Do not put the accent on your CV until you have done this final step. The main reason for this is there may be things you have not come across in your own work because you can only work with the samples that you have. So there will be things that fall through the cracks. And some of those things for some accents are like, if you get those things wrong, people are gonna know that you can't actually do that accent. Case in point, RP, received pronunciation. Received pronunciation is not just posh English. I mean, my accent has got less posh as I've got older because I'm not a precocious 6-year-old anymore correcting everyone's pronunciation. But people around me growing up used to tease me because I sounded quite posh. And even now, if I go back home, I definitely sound posher than people from my hometown. But I don't have an RP accent. And there are certain pronunciation things that reflect that fact. We've already talked about bottle, kettle, little, and bottle, kettle, little. That's quite a subtle one, but someone who knows an RP accent will pick it up. The word ate. I would say I ate a bowl of porridge. In RP, it's I ate a bowl of porridge. Completely different pronunciation. Same with the word harassed. They were harassing me. In RP, they harassed me. They were harassing me. Completely different. And if that hasn't come up in your samples, you'd have no idea. But you can bet your bottom dollar if a casting call, especially for something from Spotlight where it's like actual professionals who know their stuff, not just like random people doing short films who don't actually know what an RP accent is, people who know what an RP accent is, if you go into an audition, RP's on your CV, and there's a line about being harassed and you say harass and not harassed, they're gonna know straight away. And you're gonna look like an idiot and they're never gonna call you in again. By the way, with RP, I can't remember them off the top of my head. If you want a video on RP accents, I'll dig out all of my stuff from college. But there are lots of other words that literally were looking through this list of words and like how you pronounce them, and I was like, that is just not how you pronounce that word. And it's like, in RP it is. The only way you're gonna know those words is if you've been to college and you've actually studied RP, so you can put it on your CV, like me. You've worked with an accent coach on your RP accent and they've given you the list of things that's like, absolutely, these are completely different, learn them. Or you've found a native RP English accent speaker and you've just picked their brains for ages, being like, I need to say this word, how would you say that? So you need to check it over with a native speaker or with an accent coach, so that you can fill in any of those gaps you haven't been able to fill on your own. Now, with your native speaker, make sure they're native. Don't get someone who's like, oh yeah, I lived in Cambodia for 3 years, so I can do a Cambodian accent. Like, no. Don't find someone who is from the country the accent you're working on is from, but has lived in the UK or in the US for 10 years. Even if they've kept their accent, which a lot of immigrants may have done, their accent is still going to be different if they'd stayed in that country all of that time. You want to find someone who was born in that country or raised in that country, more raised than born, like spent a significant part of their formative years in that country. They know that accent. Ideally, they're still there, or if they're not still there, they've moved away incredibly recently, because anything else is probably going to be peppered with people trying to exaggerate certain aspects because they're trying to do the accent. And that's what you want to avoid, right? You don't want to sound like you're putting on an accent. You want to sound like you're actually speaking. This is why, going back to the samples, you want a sample that sounds as close to your voice as possible, because you don't want to be doing the voice of someone else. You want to get the accent to a point where it sounds like you would sound if you happened to have that accent. You don't want to be sounding like someone else. And then you put character and stuff onto that, being like, so how would the me myself sound if I was curmudgeonly? So make sure your native speaker is actually a full-on native speaker that hasn't had their accent distorted by living in a different place for too long, or like it's annoying and it might cost you money, but if you really want to put it on your CV and you're preparing this outside of doing it in a production context, you know, if you've done all of that work, hopefully by the time you get to a point where it's like, I feel ready to put this on my CV, you'd only need one session with an accent coach. You just contact them and be like, hey, I've been working on this accent. I just need like someone to verify it and just make sure that I've dotted all my I's, crossed all my T's. They'll prepare the accent before your session and they'll listen to you and they'll be like, I've noticed X, Y, and Z. I've never worked with an accent coach outside of drama school, but from the people I know who have, most accent coaches will let you record the session so you can record kind of sample phrases to practice and things like that. And even if you still need to do some work before you put it on your CV, you probably wouldn't have to have another full session with them again because they'll just let you record everything you need. The only exception to this, but not really, is if you're preparing the accent in a production, in which case they'll either have an accent or dialect coach on hand, or if they don't, then I would say fight for sticking with your own accent unless there are native speakers of the accent you're thinking of doing in the cast. So for example, when I did the rally, I learned a multicultural London English accent. Half of the cast and creative team had grown up in London and had that accent. So throughout the process, I could literally just be like, would you say it like this? And they'd be like, yeah, or no, it's more like this. So I had people on hand to verify the accent for me. Finally, I want to end this video on what accents you should probably think about prioritizing. This is going to depend on where you're working, your casting, what area of theatre that you work in. But in general, I'd say if you're a British actor working in musical theatre, you definitely want your standard American on point because so much of the musical theatre canon is standard American English. Depending on the show, you might need to be more specific than that, but if your standard American is good, it will probably do you just to, you know, get through the audition process. I'd also say for British actors, if you're, again, musical theatre, or if your kind of casting is kind of more costume drama, period drama, you want to definitely have your RP on point. If your casting is, again, kind of period drama, but you tend to play more of the comedy roles or more of the lower class roles, of those are more your casting, probably Cockney. To be honest, I've only had to prepare Cockney for an audition once. Cockney isn't that common, but there's quite a bit of musical theatre canon where you would need a Cockney accent, slash for period stuff where Cockney, especially if it's like period in London, Cockney was more prevalent. So it's just useful to kind of have in your back pocket if you know that's your kind of casting. For non-Brits wanting to work in the UK, I would say, again, definitely for musical theatre, make sure you can do an American accent, even though this isn't America. For just straight theatre, if you don't want to be typecast as like the foreigner from whatever country you're originally from, having a decent English accent, and I would recommend learning RP, but also standard English. RP as an actual accent in this country is not as common anymore. It's only if you're, I mean, having said that, Josh has an RP accent slightly. Yeah, so like RP is kind of still around, but amongst normal people, it is watered down a little bit. You're not gonna get kind of an RP accent a la like World War II British BBC broadcaster amongst like normal people. That is definitely going to be the upper classes that are going to be speaking in that kind of accent. Maybe like upper middle class at a push. Middle class, lower middle class, working class, you're not going to be needing that. So if your casting isn't rich people in period dramas, RP isn't going to serve you as much as just having a standard English accent. And then I guess this is kind of more of the stereotypes, but like if you look more Celtic, maybe think about learning either a Scottish accent or a Welsh accent or an Irish accent as well. Just because if you look like you're from there, it could open up more opportunities for you. Also, just as a final point, that's not to say that you have to learn these accents. If you only want to work in your own native accent, that's completely fine. This is just if you're thinking, oh, what accents might get me more work, then what would be helpful? And yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. So I'm going to do the outro. So those are my top 6 tips for how to start learning an accent by yourself from scratch. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you on the channel. Come on down. We have a great time talking like people from different places. Stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, friends!